Stop scrolling. Because what you're about to hear is not a rumor. It's the kind of Hollywood disaster that doesn't just break families, it breaks the internet. For months, people thought Kandi Burruss and Todd Tucker were handling their breakup calmly, respectfully, like adults. That illusion died the moment the court doors closed and the real war began. What started with a quiet filing on November 21, 2025 erupted into the most explosive, humiliating, career-shattering divorce battle Bravo has ever seen. This wasn't love ending, this was power collapsing, and someone desperately trying to hide the truth as it burned. Because the second Todd filed his response, the entire tone shifted. Full custody, spousal support, child support, prenup challenge. Every demand louder, uglier, greedier than the last. Todd claimed he was pressured to sign the prenup. He said he didn't have a lawyer. He said he didn't have a choice. But he didn't expect what Kandi pulled from her phone, that one recording hidden in a locked folder that wiped out his entire story in 15 seconds. The moment the courtroom heard Todd's own voice saying, "I'm ready. No pressure. I want to sign this," the air changed. The judge leaned forward. Todd froze. His entire narrative shattered like glass under a spotlight. And that was just the beginning. Because after the filing, every hearing exposed something darker. Portia, the alleged threesome conversation, Kandi's rumored affair, Mama Joyce's claims, Todd's jealousy over her success, old fights resurfacing like ghosts. And then the lowest blow, Todd demanding DNA tests for Ace and Blaze. The courtroom gasped. Kandi broke. And social media exploded. By the time the judge stamped the file and declared the divorce finalized, one truth was undeniable. This wasn't a marriage ending. This was a mask falling. Todd didn't just lose the case. He lost the narrative, the public, and the sympathy he thought he still owned. This is the story the cameras never showed, the war that only started after she filed. And, once you hear the rest, you'll understand why the internet is calling this the most shocking divorce in Bravo history. Buckle up, because what unfolded after Kandi Burruss filed for divorce on November 21, 2025 wasn't a separation, it was a demolition disguised as due process. A slow-motion collapse that exposed everything the public was never meant to hear. The filing hit the clerk's desk with no warning, no public statement, no hints, no Bravo tears or reality TV theatrics. Just paperwork. Quiet, clean, final. But the silence didn't mean peace. It meant preparation. The kind of preparation that only begins when someone finally realizes they're no longer saving a marriage, they're saving themselves. In the days after the filing, something in the air around Atlanta shifted. People close to the couple whispered that the tension had been boiling for years, but nobody expected it to rupture with this kind of force. What looked like a simple, respectful separation suddenly transformed into a courtroom earthquake. And there was no returning to the narrative either of them once pretended to protect. The first hearing made it obvious that this wasn't going to be a polite walk away. Todd Tucker walked in with a face that wasn't heartbroken, it was determined. His lawyers entered with thick folders, sharpened notes, and a tone colder than the marble floors under their shoes. When the judge asked for preliminary motions, Todd's side didn't hesitate. Full custody, spousal support, child support, and an immediate challenge to the prenup. It landed like a bomb. Not because these demands were impossible, but because of how fast they came. As if they weren't reactions, they were blueprints, plans, strategies waiting for the right moment to be activated. And that moment was Kandi's filing. Todd claimed he had been pressured into signing the prenup. One day before the wedding. No lawyer. No choice. No time to think. He used the kind of words that trigger courtroom tension, forced, manipulated, unfair. His voice carried practiced disappointment, but not a trace of fear. He wasn't emotional. He was organized. As if this wasn't an accusation, it was step one. But while Todd spoke, the judge's eyes repeatedly shifted to Kandi. Not because she interrupted. Not because she reacted dramatically. But because she didn't react at all. No shaking head. No tears. No rebuttal. Just stillness. The kind of stillness that comes from someone who didn't file out of rage, but out of exhaustion. And certainty. The courtroom atmosphere changed again when the judge asked if the prenup had been discussed privately. Todd's team leaned hard into the pressure theory. They painted a portrait of a groom backed into a corner by a superstar bride, a man without equal footing who signed something he didn't understand. And that's when everything started to unravel. Because after the filing, every hearing unearthed more than the last. The courtroom became a vault cracking open. Secrets that had been buried under years of family dinners, vacations, red carpets, and reality TV edits came spilling out. Not in whispers. In transcripts. In testimony. In arguments that sounded less like marital disputes and more like excavations. One witness raised the infamous conversation involving Portia, the alleged threesome discussion that shook Bravo fans years ago. Suddenly, an old rumor became courtroom content. An attorney read the transcript out loud. The judge's brow tightened. Kandi's hands froze on the table. Todd looked down, jaw rigid. Even if the story was exaggerated or misremembered, the fact that it resurfaced at all told the judge one thing. This marriage had fractures long before November 2025. And it didn't stop there. Todd's team dragged in the subject of Kandi's rumored affair, a whisper that had lived on gossip blogs but never been spoken in front of a judge. Kandi didn't flinch, but her lawyer did. Not out of fear, out of disgust. The tactic was obvious. Muddy the water enough so the judge wouldn't see who was swimming toward advantage. Then came the part that scorched the room. Mama Joyce. Her name alone shifted the energy. Lawyers exchanged glances. Even the court reporter paused for half a second. Todd's team accused her of years of toxic interference. They played clips, showed old interviews, dug up reunions. Every time Mama Joyce had questioned Todd's intentions was suddenly presented as evidence of bias, pressure, manipulation. But then Kandi's side countered with something harsher. Mama Joyce didn't hate Todd because of ego. She doubted him because she sensed something deeper. Something that didn't smell like partnership. Something that tasted like opportunity. And that word, opportunity, hung over Todd like smoke. The drama escalated when Riley Burruss and Kayla Tucker became part of the proceedings. 2 daughters. 1 courtroom. Years of blended family tension laid bare. Riley spoke quietly, without theatrics, saying Todd never treated her like a daughter and always compared her to Kayla. Kayla fired back emotionally, claiming Kandi never embraced her as family. The argument wasn't loud, but it was raw. Real hurt. Real distance. Real proof the home was divided long before the paperwork. The judge cut them off, but not before absorbing the truth behind their voices. This wasn't a unified household breaking apart. It was a fractured one finally admitting its cracks. And then, as if the atmosphere wasn't already poisoned, Todd made the most devastating request of all. DNA tests. For Ace and Blaze. The gasp wasn't dramatic, it was instinctive. Even the judge's expression tightened. Kandi inhaled sharply, like the words had physically hit her. Her lawyer slammed the file shut in disbelief. Todd didn't look at her. Didn't look at the judge. He stared straight ahead, as if refusing to face the emotional carnage of what he'd just said. It was the lowest blow of the entire case. And it changed everything. Because the moment Todd questioned the paternity of the children he raised, something in the courtroom shifted permanently. Sympathy evaporated. Neutrality dissolved. This wasn't strategy anymore. This was cruelty disguised as legal procedure. But the most shocking moment came in the final hearing, the day everything collapsed. Todd's lawyer repeated the same claim again. The prenup was signed under pressure. No lawyer. No consent. He said it cleanly, confidently, as if it were the strongest part of the case. And then the judge turned to Kandi with a simple question. Do you have any evidence to counter this? She nodded once. Unlocked her phone. Opened a hidden folder. Tapped a file that had never seen the light of day. A video filled the courtroom speakers. Todd's voice. Calm. Smooth. Clear. I'm good. I want to sign this. No pressure. I love you. I'm doing the right thing. The silence was suffocating. Todd's face drained of color. His lawyer's pen slipped. The judge leaned forward, eyes narrowed. Everything Todd claimed for months disintegrated in seconds. When the judge finally spoke, the decision wasn't dramatic. It was concise. Final. Divorce. Finalized. No applause. No arguments. Just the end. Custody was left undecided. The prenup challenge collapsed. The children remained with Kandi. Outside the courthouse, the public didn't wait for press releases or statements. They made their judgment instantly. They saw the video. They heard the demands. They remembered the DNA request. They remembered Mama Joyce's warnings. And they knew one truth that echoed louder than any legal ruling. This wasn't heartbreak. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't vulnerability. This was greed. And it finally got caught. The shock of that courtroom video didn't fade. It didn't die down. It didn't even settle. It spread slowly, sharply, like a crack moving across glass that was already under too much pressure. What happened after the divorce was finalized wasn't closure. It was fallout. The kind of fallout that doesn't come from anger, but from revelation. Because once the judge stamped that file, every lie Todd had built his case on started collapsing in real time, one exposed strategy after another, until it was impossible to tell whether he ever wanted a marriage or just an advantage. The moment Kandi walked out of the courthouse, cameras flashed, but she didn't stop. She didn't speak. She didn't defend. She didn't celebrate. She didn't even look around. Her silence wasn't weakness anymore. It was proof that the war had cost her more than she'd ever admit publicly. Her face didn't show revenge. It showed exhaustion. It showed betrayal that had grown so old it no longer stung, it just weighed. Todd walked out minutes later, eyes burning, jaw locked, hands shaking as if the final verdict had cut deeper than he expected. Not because the marriage ended, but because the control slipped from his hands in front of witnesses, lawyers, reporters, and a judge who no longer believed him. He didn't lose a spouse that day. He lost credibility. And he knew it. But the most brutal part was that the real chaos didn't happen inside the court. It happened after. In conference rooms. In online forums. In leaked whispers. In family arguments that spilled past closed doors. In fans dissecting every old episode, every shady moment, every quiet fight caught on camera years earlier. Suddenly, everything Todd ever joked about didn't sound like jokes. Everything he ever claimed sounded rehearsed. Everything he ever did looked timed. The first explosion came when insiders revealed that the DNA test demand wasn't a spontaneous courtroom outburst. It had been drafted, discussed, prepared, typed into an official document before the hearing even started. People didn't want to believe it at first, but when the legal paperwork surfaced confirming the request, social media erupted with a fury that could have burned through the city. It felt like betrayal on a level reality TV had never shown. A man questioning the children he raised. The children who called him father. The children who trusted him. The children who never asked to be part of any of this. And then came the next wave, the resurfacing of old arguments, voice notes, and texts that painted a darker picture of the marriage behind the scenes. Not explosive fights. Not screaming battles. Something far colder. Calculated remarks. Subtle comparisons. Quiet insults disguised as jokes. Emotional distance that grew over years, not days. It wasn't chaos, it was erosion. People who once defended Todd started questioning the timeline. Why did the push for custody begin only after the prenup challenge? Why did the DNA demand appear at the same time financial disclosures were required? Why did he repeat the pressure story so confidently when the video existed? Why did he think the video didn't exist? How did he not remember what he said that night? It wasn't just a contradiction. It was strategy exposed under daylight. Meanwhile, the blended family fractures grew sharper. Riley stopped holding back. Not online, not in private, not even in rooms where cameras weren't welcome. She didn't yell or scream. She just stated what she'd been holding for years, that Todd never treated her like his own. That he acted like a competitor for attention, not a father figure. That he undermined decisions. That he used her as a measuring stick against Kayla. That she felt like an outsider in a house that was supposed to feel safe. Kayla didn't stay silent either. She defended her father fiercely, insisting that he was misunderstood, that he had tried, that he wasn't given a chance. But the bitterness in her voice said something the court didn't need transcripts to understand. Neither daughter felt protected. Neither felt prioritized. Neither felt like the adults in the house ever chose them over the battles they were fighting with each other. The judge had warned them earlier about stability, but stability had never been real. It was a performance for cameras. A facade for fans. A recycled storyline wrapped in positivity for television. Once the filing happened, the truth flushed out like poison released from a cracked bottle. Todd, in the weeks following the finalized divorce, became more combative than ever. Not publicly, he knew better than to give interviews. But behind closed doors, every decision he made hinted at a need to reclaim something he felt slipping. He challenged custody schedules. He questioned financial disclosures. He demanded access to documents he had never cared about during the marriage. And every move felt less like parenting and more like retaliation. Kandi, on the other hand, did something nobody expected. She stopped responding. Not in court. Her lawyers handled everything with surgical precision. But emotionally, she detached. For the first time in years, she wasn't debating, explaining, convincing, defending. She was finished. Not with Todd. With the idea that the marriage ever had the stability the public imagined. The prenup video wasn't just evidence. It was a timestamp. Proof of when the truth stopped and the performance began. And then the internet did what the court never could. It exposed the pattern. Fans dug up the old moment when Todd laughed about plans if things didn't work. They revisited the storyline about Mama Joyce calling him an opportunist. They replayed the reunion clip where Todd made comments about shared assets. They quoted the scenes where he talked about deserving things. The puzzle pieces rearranged themselves into a truth everyone recognized, but nobody admitted out loud for years. Not until now. The more people looked, the clearer it became. The prenup wasn't unfair. It was necessary. The custody fight wasn't about love. It was leverage. The pressure story wasn't trauma. It was tactic. The DNA request wasn't confusion. It was insult. The financial secrecy wasn't an accident. It was concealment. And when outsiders put all of it together, the image that once protected Todd shattered. He wasn't the blindsided husband. He wasn't the wounded partner. He wasn't the calm victim. He was the strategist who lost control of the narrative. The moment the video surfaced, everything tilted. The court no longer saw pressure. They saw preparation. The daughters no longer saw a father caught in conflict. They saw a man choosing battles over healing. The public no longer saw a couple trying to save a marriage. They saw two people who had been drowning in silence long before the filing ever happened. The finalized divorce wasn't closure. It was exposure. A reminder that some relationships don't break, they get unmasked. And this one wasn't unmasked gently. It was ripped open with evidence that left nothing to interpretation. Some divorces end with signatures. This one ended with revelation. And every revelation pointed to the same truth. The love didn't fail. The intentions did. The dust never settled. Even after the divorce was finalized, even after the judge stamped the file, even after the courtroom emptied out, something in the air refused to quiet itself. The story didn't end when the marriage ended. It deepened, darkened, thickened into a fog that followed both of them long after the courtroom lights shut off. Because while most divorces stop at signatures, this one kept bleeding into the spaces neither of them could control. People expected silence after the final judgment. A break. A pause. A moment where both sides stepped back to breathe. But the silence that came wasn't peaceful. It was tense, sharp, loaded. The kind of silence that means the real truth hasn't surfaced yet, only the legal truth has. And legal truth is never the whole truth. In the weeks that followed, new details began surfacing from the closed-door meetings that had happened after the divorce was finalized. Not leaks, not scandals. Just pieces of information slipping out through people who had seen too much to keep quiet. It became obvious that the final hearing had been just the climax. There was an entire collapse building between the lines. One insider revealed that right after the judge announced the divorce decision, Todd didn't leave the courtroom immediately. He stayed seated, staring at the table in front of him as if the verdict had sucked the air out of his chest. Not because he wanted to save the marriage, but because he hadn't expected to lose the narrative so violently. The prenup video had shattered more than his case. It shattered the image he'd constructed for months. The image of a man who was pressured, ignored, pushed aside. The video erased that version of him in seconds. Kandi didn't look back at him once. Not when she stood up. Not when she walked out. Not even when cameras chased her down the hallway. It wasn't hatred. It wasn't anger. It was a kind of grief that had turned numb. The kind that comes from realizing you spent years loving someone who was rehearsing an exit strategy while you were rehearsing forgiveness. But the outside world didn't move on quietly. The internet took the prenup clip and turned it into a weapon of truth. Every publication, every TikTok commentator, every gossip page broke down Todd's tone, his expression, his choice of words. They slowed the audio. They analyzed the body language. They pointed out how calm he looked, how deliberate, how comfortable, how willing. Every frame of the video stood in direct opposition to everything he claimed under oath. And then came the next blow, a report showing that Todd's own legal team had been unaware of some financial ventures he'd created during the marriage. Ventures he never disclosed. Ventures he listed privately. Ventures he allegedly protected more fiercely than he protected his family bond. The court documents didn't accuse him of fraud, but they didn't need to. The patterns spoke louder than accusations. As more information hit the timeline, the conversation shifted from shock to recognition. People began saying what Mama Joyce had said years earlier. He wasn't building a marriage. He was building a fallback plan. The kind that keeps a man comfortable even if the marriage doesn't survive. And once the internet adopted this interpretation, every old episode of every show they'd ever filmed together became evidence of something people swore they'd missed. Then the blended family tension resurfaced. Riley didn't give interviews, but her social media activities said more than words ever could. She liked posts calling Todd manipulative. She shared indirect quotes about loyalty. She posted lyrics about choosing peace over chaos. Kayla responded indirectly too, posting cryptic messages about one-sided stories and outsiders who never understood their bond. The daughters weren't yelling at each other, but the distance between them grew into a public canyon. The next wave of shock came from something darker, something that hadn't been discussed openly in court, but was whispered afterward. The emotional distance between Todd and the children during the final months of the marriage. A nanny anonymously described moments where Todd seemed cold, detached, irritated by small things. Times when he dismissed their needs. Times when he ignored their excitement. Nothing illegal. Nothing outwardly abusive. Just hollow. Heavy. Absent. And people started piecing together how that might have fed into the judge's decision to leave the kids with Kandi temporarily. The DNA test request continued haunting everything. It wasn't just a question, it was a wound that wouldn't close. Fans couldn't comprehend why a father figure would demand something so extreme unless he was trying to shatter the other side psychologically. The court had already dismissed it as irrelevant, but the public didn't. It became a symbol. A symbol of how far the conflict had gone. A symbol of betrayal that even strangers could feel in their bones. And while social media ripped him apart, Todd began retreating from public life. Not disappearing, strategizing. Not posting, watching. Every move he made looked like preparation for a comeback, not a recovery. He changed lawyers. He filed new motions. He reconsidered his approach to custody. Not from love, but from something colder. Something that looked more like revenge than responsibility. Meanwhile, Kandi did the opposite. She poured her energy into the children. Into work. Into routines. Into appearing strong even when she wasn't. She didn't make grand statements. She didn't clap back online. She let the documents speak for her. She let the video speak for itself. She let Todd's actions collapse under their own weight. She didn't win because she fought harder. She won because she stopped fighting for someone who was fighting against her. But the most heartbreaking part came from the whispers of what happened after the kids learned about the DNA request. Ace, still too young to fully grasp it, sensed something was wrong. Blaze asked questions nobody wanted to answer. The divide wasn't just between parents, it seeped into the children's understanding of who they could trust. That part of the fallout didn't make headlines. It lived in closed rooms, in quiet nights, in the spaces between explanations. The cultural verdict grew even sharper when people revisited the way Todd had acted in earlier seasons, earlier interviews, earlier red carpets. They saw the pattern for the first time. How often he talked about finances. How often he talked about power. How often he measured contribution. How often he framed decisions like transactions. The internet didn't just uncover a truth, they rewrote the entire narrative of the marriage through hindsight. And then came the revelation that ended every argument. The prenup had never threatened him until the divorce came into sight. That was when he challenged it. That was when he called it unfair. That was when he questioned its validity. If he truly believed he'd been pressured, he would have said something years earlier. The silence was the evidence. The timing was the confession. In the end, the story wasn't about who hurt who the most. It wasn't about who fought hardest. It wasn't about who cried, who stayed, who left. It was about intention. And intention shows itself in the moments people don't think will be revealed. The truth didn't come out in outbursts. It didn't come out in arguments. It didn't come out in emotional scenes. It came out in a video recorded quietly, without drama, without fear. A video that showed a man agreeing to something he later swore he was forced into. A video that destroyed everything he built in court. A video that proved the marriage wasn't attacked by betrayal, it was corroded by motive. The divorce wasn't the tragedy. The tragedy was realizing how long the truth had been hiding. Here's the truth nobody wants to face. When the court doors closed and the final judgment hit the record, nothing about this story truly ended. The papers only confirmed what had already been destroyed, and every silent moment afterward carried a weight louder than any argument ever filmed. You watched a marriage collapse in public, but what crumbled behind the scenes was far more unsettling. Trust didn't break overnight. Love didn't disappear in a single hearing. What shattered everything was intention exposed under the brightest possible light. The video that surfaced didn't just contradict a claim, it dismantled a strategy. The custody demands weren't expressions of devotion, they were positions on a battlefield. The DNA request wasn't confusion, it was a cut meant to bleed. Every move made after the filing revealed a story that had been forming quietly in the shadows, and once the truth finally stepped forward, the mask could never return to place. So here's the question left hanging in the aftermath: what happens now? What becomes of a future shaped by legal scars and emotional debris? How do children grow inside a narrative they never chose, but will eventually uncover? This isn't about gossip anymore. It's about consequence. It's about recognizing how quickly affection can transform into leverage when the foundation beneath it was never steady enough to hold. If you think this ends with a signature, you're missing the real impact. Court rulings finalize documents, not damage. The next chapter won't unfold in hearings. It will unfold in routines, choices, and truths that surface long after the cameras move on. Stay watching. Stay questioning. Stories like this don't fade. They echo. Because when a truth this heavy finally escapes, it doesn't vanish into silence. It lingers, reshaping every memory, every motive, every version of events people once believed.